The giant monster tearing through cities has been in the Japanese consciousness for a very long time, especially with stories of Godzilla inspired by a post-World War II Japan, with the giant monsters of calamity serving as a metaphor for nuclear weapons. So when I saw Kaiju number 8 by Naoya Matsumoto, I was excited to see how he could refresh the classic genre with his new shonen title. Kaiju number 8 offers a fun action-packed underdog story where the protagonist turns into the very threat that threatens his own people, and uses it to fight against the threat. A similar trope to titles like Parasite, Tokyo Ghoul, and Attack on Titan, this time with kaiju. Before reviewing the story, here's a quick spoiler warning. For those who have not read it, I highly recommend you do. Ready? Kaiju number 8 tells the story of Kafka Hibino, who aspires to be a member of the Defense Corps, pretty much the monster hunter army, in a world where monster attacks are frequent. Kafka has dreamt about this goal with his childhood friend Mina, who has reached the top of the forces, while Kafka instead fails to join and leads a life as a member of the monster disposal crew, pretty much becoming a janitor with no power to reach his dream. A mediocre life by his childhood expectations. Following a monster attack, Kafka encounters a parasite-type kaiju that forces its way through his mouth, turning him into a kaiju. For some quick context, Kafka, the name of the protagonist, comes from an author of the same name who wrote Metamorphosis, a story about a man who transforms into a huge insect and becomes a pest to his family. Other than the transformation part, it doesn't seem that Kaiju Kafka is modeled after that story. With his newfound powers, Kafka aims to give his lifelong dream a final try, and his adventures in the Defense Corps to fight by Mina's side begins. For a manga about monsters, I'd expect grimy and harsh visuals, but Kaiju number 8 subverted my expectations with a very polished art style. The line widths are very clean, yet thick and bold, in both its panels and characters. It seems that the manga was primarily drawn or at least inked digitally, as the lines vary quite consistently across its hatches. Kaiju number 8 is in stark contrast from other monster or demon hunter titles like Chainsaw Man, with very rough and sketchy lines. The polished nature contributes to the main quality that I noticed in Kaiju number 8, its readability and its page flow through the composition of its panels. In addition to the clean lines, Matsumoto also dictates the forms and compositions with pretty simple, flat, but effective tones to develop the silhouettes and shadows of his panels. Let's dissect this panel, for example, in the first chapter. The tones develop the sunlight that glide the reader's eyes from the right corner down to the bottom left, while reading the dialogue smoothly. Smooth flow is hard to spot when you don't look for it. As far as actual monsters go, I generally like the designs. Matsumoto again put some work into his character design and composition, varying his forms and shapes to make a cool character like Kaiju number 9. But the monsters definitely have a more cool rather than gruesome look to them, which is fit for a shonen action title. Kaiju number 9 reminds me a lot of a particular monster in Jujutsu Kaisen, which brings me to a quick aside in that Matsumoto seems to have a lot of influences from current popular titles and generally executes them well, but I feel like I've seen them somewhere before without a big twist. Diving back into Matsumoto's composition, Matsumoto's thought in his panels can be seen in subtle repetition of panels, like where Shinomiya pops out of the panel over the rest, cementing her character as above the rest in the pursuit of perfection, or the many one-panel pages to showcase the impact of an action shot. Kaiju number 8's simple yet effective composition really shines, which brings me to the best part of the manga. The fight scenes are just gorgeous to look at, with very dynamic poses supported by the very clean, sweeping lines. Many of the action sequences just have that feel, that follow through, that can make you feel the impact of each swing or punch, especially the punches. punches seem like it takes a lot of inspiration from One Punch Man, where Matsumoto shows Kafka swinging through on his punch pretty consistently, then totally obliterating the villain, showing the sheer strength of his character. But my favorite poses are from Hoshina, whose specialty is in close combat. Seeing how Matsumoto painstakingly choreographs his fight scenes with care for the martial arts poses he does definitely looks more impressive than Mina shooting her big gun or just a simple punch from Kafka. The guy is just a badass, and Matsumoto provides that punch literally and figuratively to a Monster of the Week type title. But even with this buildup of action, there are areas that soften the manga for me. Personally, I think the polished art style takes away from the intense mood of the series, but I don't think this title is really going for that heavy feeling. Matsumoto frequently puts in a cartoony style to lighten the mood, which is highly typical for a shonen manga, but I think that lightheartedness extends throughout the whole story, with the lack of gravity in the characters' plights. Consequences are never really felt, and no one really faces any real danger as of yet. As I noted earlier, Kafka's monster form reminds me of One Punch Man, where he can just turn into a kaiju and hit the monster just once and it's over. This is good for One Punch Man because that title uses the invincibility as a writing device for humor to parody the silliness of how shonen characters are too strong. But Kaiju number 8 shows Kafka's invincibility in a serious way that isn't as refreshing. So there's not much clever conflict resolution tactics or strategy in how they go about winning fights. It's just sheer power, which makes a lot of the fights seem repetitive and less earned once they do win. In the beginning, Kafka used his expertise and knowledge of monster anatomy as a member of the monster disposal crew to help take down monsters, much like how a young Midoriya from My Hero Academia takes notes on the quirks of other heroes. But as the series goes on, the true danger everyone faces is negated so easily by Kafka unleashing his monster form. I would have liked to have seen Kafka earn his victories more through the merits of his human abilities and intelligence than his overpowered gift, which would have made the story more interesting. But I'm also a sucker for action. The thing holding him back thus far has been hiding his identity from the Defense Corps, with lots of foreshadowing on the consequences of death should they figure out his identity. But when it comes time to meet the strongest of the Defense Corps, a very callous and intense man focused on subjugating every monster, Shinomiya's dad, he easily accepts his existence after one fight and allows him to continue fighting for the Defense Corps with the best fighters. The consequences underpinning the story are easily overcome, which takes some air out of the story. But instead we have a new inner conflict after Kafka goes berserk in his monster form, where he questions if he can control his kaiju form. But again, the danger of this is negated very quickly in his next fight, where he actually learns to control his form better without any real sacrifices or struggles to get there. To date, none of the characters or supporting cast have suffered any life-changing injuries or deaths, fighting the biggest wave of the strongest monsters. It seems like everyone has plot armor made out of kaiju and is too strong for even the real kaiju. Other supporting characters are really just there to amplify the perceived strength of other characters, like Shinomiya building up their strength by saying their impressive resumes just to blow them out of the water and not develop their characters afterwards. The villains are also very one-dimensional as well, with the monsters being blown to bits without any development, and the current main villain's motivations are still not revealed. Overall, I think Kaiju number 8 is a technically well-polished manga that is just a fun and light-hearted read, but I don't see much new twists to the many great influences or similarities I see from other past titles. I'm really excited to see how the story develops and think that Kaiju number 8 could easily counteract my criticisms as the story develops and grows even more in audience. There's so many questions to be answered, including why Kafka was chosen by the kaiju parasite and the cause of the emergence of the increasingly strong clusters of kaiju. But as of now, I'm enjoying a fun battle manga to unwind to, and I'd love to hear about what you thought about Kaiju number 8 in the comments below. If you're interested in learning more about making manga and comics, feel free to check out my other videos linked below. I'll see you next time.